The story starts with the female lead, Laura, looking for a job. She has just graduated and she is a live streamer. She wants to become an influencer. We see her going for an interview at an entertainment company, which is looking for social influencers. The CEO of this company, Colin, is our male protagonist. He is a strict and serious person. When Laura arrives for the interview, she watches a girl coming out of the room crying. She was told to get out by the CEO because he disliked the extra makeup the girl had put on. All the remaining candidates are asked to remove their makeup. Everyone tried to appease the girl who was still crying in the hallway. Laura appeases her and says that the CEO must be a stuck-up who got bald at a young age and thus hates beautiful young people. At that very moment, Colin arrives in the hallway and all the other girls run away in fear. But Laura's phone falls on the ground and she is not able to leave. Colin picks up her phone and hands it to her, all the while staring at her in displeasure. It seems he has heard what she was just saying. Next, we see Laura being interviewed. Colin seems to want to dismiss her even before she finishes her introduction, but Laura shows them a can of dried scorpions. Colin, his manager, and the assistant are shocked at the sight as Laura gets close to them and eats a dried scorpion straight from the can. She then declares that she can do anything for a live stream. The manager comments that she is very passionate. Colin tries to regain his composure as he is shocked and scared to see scorpions. Next, Laura is asked if she knows diving, to which she replies that she knows diving very well and that she often goes diving as it makes her feel fearless. Colin seems to be impressed by this statement. Next, we see that Laura was shortlisted along with many other girls and they are taken to an island for further training and selection. It is harsh training where their endurance is tested. Laura does very well at the training and wins against all the other girls in the gunfight. Next, the selected girls are assigned different tasks. Laura is given the task of being Colin's diving partner. All the girls get jealous of Laura for getting a task which would help her get close to the CEO. Laura wants to change her task, but the manager tells her that she is lucky to get a job that she loves. He also tells her that she is going to be Colin's first female partner, as usually he doesn't even allow girls to get near him. Meanwhile, Laura is stressed because she lied at the interview and in fact, she has never done diving before. She decides to learn diving before she is caught. She asks the hotel staff if they have a diving facility, but they inform her that don't have it. Next, we see Laura thinking of a plan and she photoshops Colin's picture with herself. In the picture, they look very close. She sets this picture as her phone screen background and deliberately makes the receptionist see it while asking about Colin's VIP suite. The receptionist misunderstands Laura to be Colin's partner and gives her the key card to the VIP suite. She gets inside the suite happily and informs her friend about the diving issue, asking her to help her out. Next, we see Colin arriving at the hotel with his cousin Mark. They are very good friends. The receptionist gives him a mysterious smile and wishes him a great night when giving the key card. Colin finds it strange, but Mark says it might be nothing and that he is overthinking. Next, we see Laura's things scattered all over the room and she is inside the private pool of the VIP suite. She is trying to practice holding her breath inside the water. When Colin arrives at his room, he sees a woman's dress lying on the floor and a suitcase full of female clothing. He follows the scattered things and reaches the pool. There he sees a figure inside the water. He gets close to have a look, and at that very moment, Laura comes out of the pool for a breath and falls on Colin's legs. She thinks that some pervert has come inside the VIP suite and starts shouting. Mark arrives to see this chaotic scene. Next, we see Laura sitting on the sofa with a towel as she is interrogated by Colin. She apologizes and says that she wanted to practice diving and came here by mistake. Mark is trying to calm down Colin, but he is asking her questions angrily. At that very moment, Laura gets a call from her friend and Colin sees his Photoshop picture on her screen. They also overhear her friend telling her to stay away from diving as she has never tried it before, and it can be risky without any training. Colin wants to fire Laura right away, but Mark says she might be a fast learner and they need a person to go with him for the advertisement purposes. It will be hard to find a new person in such a short time. Next, we see Colin and Laura on a streamer in the middle of the ocean. They are changing into their diving costume and getting ready to dive. Meanwhile, the whole thing is being live broadcasted. This is to promote the new hotel and tourism project in the Lonos Islands. Later, when Laura and Colin jump into the ocean, something goes wrong with Laura's gear. Colin tries to help her out, but they see a huge whirlpool inside the sea. Colin pushes Laura upwards to save her, but he gets sucked into the whirlpool. Next, we see Colin back in the office on the day he was interviewing social influencers. He is shocked to see himself alive and to have time traveled into the past. He wonders if he is in a parallel universe because he died in the original world. Next, we see Laura, who has arrived for the interview. She doesn't remember anything and Colin thinks that he died to save this stupid girl. So when she introduces herself, Colin asks her if she knows how to dive. Laura lies again and says she is very good at diving. Colin starts asking her detailed questions about diving and she is not able to answer them. Laura was going to show them the can of dried scorpions, but Colin knows her trick already, so he asks her to keep that can inside and stop with her lies. He says her lies could lead to someone's death and asks her to get out. He asks security to take her out. Colin makes up his mind to stay away from Laura as he died in the parallel world because of her. Next, we see Laura meeting Mark on her way out. She finds him very attractive and has a crush on him instantly. She manages to get his business card and goes away happily. After returning home, she realizes that she dropped Mark's card in front of the company. Colin decides to put the Lonos Island promotion project on hold and cancels the interview of social influencers. He wants to stay away from the things that lead to his death. When Colin's secretary hears about his decision, she faints from the stress. She was working on this project for months, and a sudden suspension is very shocking for her. She takes a long leave on the grounds of a bad mental state and leaves. In the absence of his secretary, Colin starts bossing around Mark and making him do all the work of his secretary. Next, we see Mark and Colin's manager trying to recruit a new secretary for Colin, but he keeps on firing every recruit within 5 minutes. Later, in the evening when he is leaving for his home, someone comes in front of his car and he almost hits her. It is Laura. She came back to find Mark's business card. They are shocked to see each other again. Colin thinks that he gets in trouble every time he is close to this girl. He gets a cab to drop her to her home. Later, that night, Colin tries to tell Mark about the things that happened to him and the parallel universe, but Mark thinks that his friend is very tired and needs rest. The next day, Mark and Colin's manager are keeping account as Colin keeps making his secretaries run away from his office crying in 5 minutes. Mark warns Colin that if he keeps firing recruits like this, he will stop helping him with his work. Next, we see Mark going to a cafe for a coffee break, and he meets Laura and her friend there. He is impressed by Laura's bold personality and offers her a job to be the CEO's secretary. Later, Laura's friend advises her to take up the job as it will be very good for her resume in future. Next, we see Laura coming to Colin's company unaware that she is going to work for Colin. She goes into his office and tidies up things. When Colin sees her in his office, he asks her to leave immediately. Laura remembers that the contract that she signed stated that she couldn't be fired without a proper reason. Otherwise, they have to pay her 3 months of salary in compensation. She is ready to go if Colin pays her. Colin takes it up as a challenge and says he will make her leave within a month on her own. Mark and Colin's manager are impressed by Laura as she broke Colin's record of firing new secretaries within 5 minutes. Mark gives Laura all the documents and manuals that she needs to follow. Laura decides to put up with Colin to stay close to Mark. Laura is shocked after reading the thick manual. It states the degree to which she needs to keep smiling at all times and even the temperature of coffee that Colin prefers. She tells her friend that she wishes to ground Colin into a powder and make a coffee of him. The next day, Colin finds Laura smiling a very stiff and robotic smile at all times. When she brings his coffee, he says it is not the right temperature, but Laura has come prepared. She puts a thermometer inside his cup and shows him the perfect temperature. Later, they get stuck in the elevator together. Laura uses a hanky to clean Colin's shoes and then uses the same hanky to dry the sweat on his face. Colin tries hard but is not able to find any mistakes in her job as these things were stated in the manual. We see them fighting like cat and mouse to put each other down. On the other side, Colin asks his bodyguard to investigate the Blue Cave diving location where he died due to a whirlpool in the parallel world, but the divers don't find any whirlpool or anything suspicious at the location. Next, he asks her to make a presentation for his next meeting. Laura knows that it is not her job, but she makes the presentation and adds funny pictures to it. Later, Colin tries to fire her, saying that she did a bad job, but Laura says it was not her job in the first place. The planning team makes presentations for the meetings. In the night, we see that they are both getting the same nightmares of drowning in the whirlpool in the Blue Cave each night. Next, we see Mr. Jim, Mark's father, who is approached by a few board members. They are angry at Colin for postponing the Lonos Island project. Mr. Jim says he will talk with Colin and try to calm down the board members. Later, we see Mark and Mr. Jim in Colin's office. Mr. Jim says that Colin has to restart the Lonos Island project as the board members are scared of the investors getting angry, which might result in stock prices falling. Colin has to reconsider his plan, and he works till late at night to find the solution. When he gets up to leave the office, he finds Laura still working on her desk. He asks her to rest and they both leave the office together. While they are in the elevator, it gets stuck again and Colin thinks that Laura is unlucky for him. It is dark inside the elevator, and Laura starts telling Colin scary stories and he keeps getting scared. When the elevator opens, they are found hugging each other. Colin is so scared that he doesn't want to drive his car back home alone and gets a cab. Laura also gets into the cab with him. Later, Colin gets down near his house, but he forgets his phone inside the cab. Laura gets back to his house to return his phone to him. She finds the door open and gets inside. She finds Colin sleeping on the sofa in the living room, and when she is about to leave after putting his phone on the table, she realizes that Colin is having a nightmare. He was calling her name. In his dream, Laura was a ghost and was scaring him. When he opened his eyes, he saw Laura staring into his eyes. He gets shocked and screams. Later, Laura is hungry, so Colin makes her noodles and asks her to leave after eating. He also gives her a bracelet which makes a jingling sound every time she moves. He wants to be warned when she is coming near him. Next, we see Laura returning home and her aunt asks her about the bracelet. She misunderstands that Laura has a boyfriend. Laura's parents died when she was young and her aunt took her in and raised her. They have a very good relationship. The next day, Laura delivers Colin's coffee along with the invitation to a dinner party in the evening. Colin asks her to get his suit from the designer for him. Laura leaves for the designer's shop. Later, when she returns, she meets Mark and Colin, who are about to leave. Colin asks her to get changed for the party. He takes his suit and scolds her for being so late. Next, we see Mark, Colin, and Laura entering the dinner venue. While Colin is talking with the media people, Laura keeps looking at his pants. Actually, the young interns at the designer shop made a mistake and spoiled Colin's suit. There is a hole near his pants pocket. Since there was very little time, they tried to patch it up and asked Laura to help them out. Every time Colin is about to put his hands in his pockets, Laura distracts him in some way. Later, when Colin gets on the stage to deliver his speech, he puts his hands in his pockets and his fingers pop out of the hole. He manages to hide it from the camera and people, but Laura knows he is going to be very angry at her, so she tries to run away from the party. When Colin finishes his speech and tries to follow Laura, he sees a photographer. He remembers he was the diving instructor in the parallel universe. He had adjusted Laura's equipment and later something went wrong with her suit. He tries to get to him, but the suspicious photographer starts running away. He follows him, but he runs away. Instead, he finds Laura trying to leave the venue. He says that he will fire her for her mistake this time. Laura knows that she is going to get fired, so she gets back inside to eat and drink her full before leaving. She drinks a lot and gets drunk. When Colin is leaving to go back home, he finds Laura vomiting outside the venue. She is drunk, so he decides to drop her home. She twists her leg because of her high heels. Colin carries her on her back. Laura's aunt sees them outside the house and invites Colin inside. She misunderstands that they are in a relationship. She asks Colin a lot of questions and tells him about Laura's parents. Colin realizes that Laura also lost her parents in childhood like him and feels sympathy towards her. Meanwhile, we see the suspicious person hiding around Laura's house. He is keeping an eye on them. On the other side, Laura and Colin bond over their similar past. Colin asks Laura if she misses her parents. He tells her that they might be alive in a parallel universe and living happily with her. Laura is excited to know that Colin also believes in the parallel universe. She shows him a book on the parallel universe that she keeps reading. She gifts him the book. Colin returns to his home with the book. On his way, he remembers how his parents died because their boat drowned in the ocean on the Lonos Islands. It was their dream project. He finds Mark waiting for him when he returns home. Mark tells Colin that the designer shop people told him that it was a mistake of the young interns of the shop and not Laura's fault. So Colin texts Laura telling her that he won't fire her. Mark also tells him that he makes Laura suffer a lot. Colin decides to take care of Laura. The next day, Colin asks Laura to get 2 cups of coffee and gives her 1. Later, he asks her to get food from a famous shop. Laura had to travel in rush hour to get the food, but Colin tells her that she can have it. Laura feels that he is creating trouble for her to take revenge. Mark sees all this and asks Colin if he is taking Laura's care in this manner, to which Colin replies yes. Later, when Laura is eating all the food angrily, she chokes on it and Mark gives her water. He tells her that Colin is actually trying to take care of her in his roundabout way. He tells her that he was made to take a lot of responsibilities at a very young age, and it made him a little bit stubborn and rude, but he is a kind person. Laura feels sympathy for Colin after hearing this. Next, we see Colin, Mark, Mr. Jim, and other board members in a meeting. They all want to know Colin's reason for postponing the Lonos Island project. They remind him that it was his parents' dream project and that he should be respectful towards their wishes. At that moment, Colin's bodyguard comes and gives him some documents and tells him something. It turns out Colin had asked him to investigate the diving team and everything related to it after meeting the suspicious person at the dinner party last night. He could not find that person on the list of the staff appointed for the diving event, but he found that the diving equipment was all of very cheap quality. Mr. Jim's nephew, Mr. David, was in charge of the equipment. Colin asks him why were the equipment of such low quality. Was he trying to kill people? He fires David on the spot. Later, Colin thinks about the situation and realizes that Laura was also put in danger because of his company people. He realizes that someone is trying to harm him and that it was not an accident in the parallel universe. Next, we see Mr. Jim talking with Colin's grandpa over the phone. He convinces him to ask Colin to not fire David. Later, Colin gets a call from his grandpa inviting him for dinner. When he goes to his grandpa later in the evening, he asks him to be kind towards his relatives. Colin tells him that he was being kind by just firing David and not filing a case against him for corruption and attempt to murder. Grandpa then asks Colin to choose between one, either marry or complete the Lonos Island project. Colin has to agree to restart the Lonos Island project. The next day, David rushes inside Colin's office asking for a fight. Laura tries to stop him, but he gets in anyway. He says that he has done nothing wrong and he was duped by the company who sold him the diving equipment. Colin asks him to leave as he is not falling for his stupid excuses. David threatens him to be careful outside of the company and also warns Laura to be careful in future. They don't take his threats seriously. Next, we see Colin, Laura, and his manager go to check on the new diving equipment. Laura wants to try diving, but Colin stops her. He wears the gear and gets inside the pool, but his head starts spinning. He remembers the whirlpool of the blue cave and faints. His manager goes to find the safety personnel. Meanwhile, Laura jumps into the water to save him. She is trying to get him outside of the pool, but then they see the same suspicious person arrives and tries to electrode them inside the pool. Colin faints on seeing him, but the security people arrive and the man runs away. Colin wakes up and finds himself on a hospital bed. Laura is cutting apples for him. The doctor informs them that he is fine and just needs to rest to revive from the shock. Laura asks him to stay in bed and rest for a while, but Colin gets up to leave. Later, his bodyguard tells him that they are not able to find any clues about the mysterious man who keeps on trying to attack Colin. Colin realizes that Laura is also in constant danger because of him, and he used to think that she is unlucky. The next day, when Laura brings him his coffee, he thanks her for saving his life. She says that since he has realized that it was such a dangerous situation, he should get himself checked. She wants him to get his brain checked since he keeps fainting. But Colin asks her to leave. Later, when Laura meets her friend, she tells her how Colin just got up from the hospital bed, yet he is working and is not even getting his head checked. Her friend asks her when she started caring so much about her boss. Laura says that she does not care about him, she just cares about her salary. Next, we see that Colin and Mark are working on something and Colin is getting a call from an unknown number again and again. In the end, Colin picks up the call and the other side informs him that Laura got into an accident. Colin rushes to the hospital only to find that Laura has got just a few scratches and it was her trick to get him to the hospital. Colin starts leaving in anger, but Laura hugs his leg and refuses to get up until he agrees to get his brain tested. Everyone is watching the drama, so Colin had to agree. They get his brain tested but don't find any problem. Laura is ready to pick a fight with the doctor, but Colin takes her outside of the hospital. Later, when he gets back home, he finds Mark has made him dinner. Mark asks about Laura's health and then asks about his health. Colin realizes that it was a joint plan of Mark and Laura to get him tested. On the other side, Laura is still worried about Colin and is searching for supplements on the internet. Her aunt gives her a pack of tea, which is good for the brain, and also gives her ideas about other health-related apps and gadgets. The next day, Laura gives Colin the red tea that her aunt gave her instead of coffee. He tastes it and is about to spit it. Laura then goes on to introduce various health supplements that she has got for him and also makes him wear a smartwatch that keeps a constant track of his heartbeats and keeps notifying Laura about it. Colin smiles, realizing that she is so worried about his health. Later, the notification on Laura's phone keeps buzzing because Colin keeps getting angry every few minutes at his subordinates. Laura is already regretting connecting her phone with his smartwatch. Late in the night, Laura is sleeping when she suddenly gets a notification of danger from Colin's smartwatch. She rushes to his house. She keeps calling him, but he is not attending her calls. She shouts for him from outside the house, and when no one comes, she starts climbing the gate, and the theft alarm sets off. Colin, who was sleeping soundly, wakes up from all the noise and comes out to see that Laura was caught by the security people. He asks them to leave her. She apologizes and wants to run away, but Colin gets hold of her and asks her to stay at his home as it is very late already. Later, she sprains her ankle and Colin helps her by applying a cold compress to it. They share an ambiguous moment as Laura looks at Colin's bare chest underneath his nightgown. Colin leaves her with the cold compress and goes inside his room. Later, Laura gets a notification of his increased heart rate. The next day, they reach the office together. In a meeting for the Lonos Islands project, his team presents 3 different themes. Colin remembers that he chose the adventure theme in the parallel universe, and so this time he wants to choose some other theme. He wonders if his fate will change if he makes different choices. He asks Laura to choose a theme. The executives in the meeting are shocked at Colin giving her opinion such importance. Laura says that she liked the romance theme. Colin selects the romance theme. Next, we see Miss Jin coming to supervise a romance-themed tourist promotion project for Lonos Islands. Miss Jin is Colin's ex-girlfriend. When she enters inside his office, Laura gets a notification of Colin's increasing heart rate. Later, Laura gets to know that Miss Jin is a divorcee and also has a 7-year-old son. She watches them sitting together and discussing the project, so she asks Mark about Miss Jin. He tells her that Miss Jin and Colin were in a relationship during their college time. They loved each other a lot, but they separated because of a misunderstanding. They were both not ready to explain themselves, so they could never reconcile. Laura is shocked to hear the story as she can't believe that Colin could have a love history. Then a young boy comes to her. He is very intelligent and cute, but also a little rude, and Laura thinks he is completely like Colin. It turns out he is Miss Jin's son, Cookie. Laura makes a tragic love story in her mind. She thinks that Miss Jin might have been pregnant with Colin's baby when they parted, but she wouldn't have told him in anger and raised their baby on her own. Laura decides to become the matchmaker and plans to get Miss Jin and Colin together. She wants to get Cookie his father back. She feels a little sad thinking about Colin and Miss Jin being together, but she decides not to be selfish and help Cookie. She goes to Miss Jin's house with the excuse of talking about the romance theme in the project and notes down all her likes, dislikes, and preferences. Then, the next day, she goes to Colin's house in the morning, delivering him his breakfast. He is not willing to let her in his house, but she makes a scene again and Colin has to agree. She shows him lots of outfits and starts checking which one suits him better. Colin is not interested in her schemes, but when she says he looks young in blue color, he agrees to wear blue. Later, they share an ambiguous moment when Laura tries to make his tie. Next, we see them arriving at Miss Jin's house to pick her up for the meeting. They meet Cookie there. Miss Jin wants to take Cookie along as he is alone in the house, but Laura asks them to leave him with her. She wants to create an opportunity for Miss Jin and Colin to spend time alone. Later, we see her trying to talk to Cookie, who keeps on ignoring her. But after a while, she manages to get him interested in a game and they enjoy it together. On the other side, Miss Jin and Colin go for dinner after the meeting. The place is decorated according to Miss Jin's preference. There they talk about her ex-husband and how she manages to raise Cookie all by herself. Colin seems to be thinking of Miss Jin as a good friend and nothing more. Meanwhile, Laura is checking Colin's heartbeat rate, which is normal. Cookie gets tired after playing for long and he falls asleep. On the other side, Colin and Miss Jin are served a special drink. The waitress tells Colin that Laura had specially prepared this drink. Colin understands her intentions and puts the drink down. They go back to Miss Jin's house to find Laura sleeping on the corner of Cookie's bed. Colin tries to wake her up, but she keeps on sleeping. So Colin carries her back in his arms. The next day, Laura wakes up to find herself in Colin's bed. His clothes are scattered in the room and she gets scared, wondering what happened last night. Then, Colin comes back to his room and Laura asks him why was she sleeping in his room. Colin says that someone spiked his drink last night, so of course he ended up sleeping with a woman. Laura starts screaming that it was meant for him to be with Miss Jin. Colin scolds her for scheming and tells her how she was sleeping like a log and that he had to carry her home. Laura wonders why did not he send her to her home, to which Colin asks her to shut up and get ready. They had to go to Lonos Island to inspect the preparations there. When they reach at Lonos Island, Laura asks Colin why did he carry her in his arms in front of Miss Jin. She says she might misunderstand them. At that moment, Miss Jin also arrives at the beach. Colin sends Laura alone to try out the water skiing arrangements to punish her. She screams in the water. Later, when Colin and Miss Jin are trying out other water sports, Laura watches them together and gets a little sad, but then she says that she will do this for Cookie's sake. Next, they have to inspect the rooms prepared for tourists in a romantic setting. Laura starts acting and says that she has a stomach ache and asks them to go ahead without her. Colin has an idea that she is scheming again, but Laura runs away before he can say something. In the room, Miss Jin says that the setting is reminding her of her college days. They have an awkward moment when Miss Jin tries to kiss Colin, but he imagines Laura's face instead of Miss Jin and gets away from her. Later, he drops her back to her house. Miss Jin understands that they can't be lovers again. On the other side, the suspicious man is still following Colin and Laura. He even clicks a few pictures when Miss Jin and Colin are standing close and are about to kiss. The next day, it is Laura's birthday, and the manager tells her that Colin gives a special gift to his secretary on their birthdays. Laura gets excited, but Colin is still in shock because of the fact that he imagined her face when Jin was trying to kiss him. He starts avoiding Laura. Laura keeps waiting all day and gets disappointed when she gets no gifts. Colin doesn't even wish her on her birthday. Later in the night, she goes clubbing with her friends to celebrate. They drink and dance a lot. There she sees Mr. David with a person. He is talking about leaking some pictures of Colin. When Laura hears about this, she starts recording their video, but she gets caught. David catches her and her friends and makes her delete the video. He asks them to finish all the alcohol on the table, or else he won't let them leave. Laura secretly sends a message to Mark, telling her that she is in danger. On the other side, when Mark receives the message, he is with Colin. Colin was trying to tell him that he might be liking someone. Mark tells him that Laura is in danger, and also that it is her birthday today. Colin gets angry that she did not ask for help from him, and also because he doesn't even know that it is her birthday, and leaves in a rush to help her. At the club, Laura and her friends were having a hard time finishing all the alcohol. David also tries to misbehave with Laura, but at that very instant Colin arrives and beats David. He also calls the security. Later, when he is taking Laura home, he gets angry at her for going to the club and putting herself in danger like this. Laura starts crying after getting scolded, but she was just acting to make Colin stop scolding her. Colin asks her to remove her makeup. Laura says that he talks like an old man. Colin doesn't like how she keeps calling her old man all the time. Later, Colin drops her to her home and gives her a lollipop as a birthday gift. Meanwhile, the mysterious man is continuously following Laura. Colin's bodyguard is able to get close to him one time. He tries to catch him, but he manages to run away. On the other hand, the pictures of Colin and Miss Jin are spread all over the internet. Laura sees those pictures and wonders if her plan was successful. Then, she gets sad thinking about them together. She is confused about her desires. Next, we see Grandpa looking at the viral pictures. His assistant informs him about Miss Jin's background. Grandpa is happy to know that she has a son as well, and rumors are that he is Colin's son. He asks to make an appointment with them and invites them for lunch. On the other side, Colin is worried that Laura must have seen the viral pictures and misunderstood his relationship with Miss Jin. Then, he gets a call from his grandpa asking him to meet. When he goes to meet his grandpa, he finds that he has arranged for Laura to bring Miss Jin and Cookie over lunch. Laura is about to leave after escorting them, but Colin stops her and makes her join them for lunch. Miss Jin explains it to Grandpa that they are not in a relationship and that Cookie is not Colin's son. Colin also makes things clear in front of his grandpa. He also acknowledges liking someone. Meanwhile, Cookie takes Laura out to play and says that Colin is not fit for his mother as he is not romantic. They have a nice lunch and part happily. Next, Colin corners Laura and asks her to stop trying to be a matchmaker for Miss and him. He says that there is no possibility of a relationship between them. The next day, we see that the rumors are spreading more and all the employees are talking about it. Laura decides to put it to an end and asks her friend to send her the voice recording. Actually, her friend had recorded the whole incident with David that day in the club. Later, Laura sends the recording to Colin. He is happy that she is worried about him. On the other side, we see Mark asking his father, Mr. Jim, to take some action to stop the rumors and fake news being spread all over the internet against Colin, but Mr. Jim seems uninterested in doing anything. Mark meets Colin and suggests taking legal action against the fake news, but Colin says Laura has already managed to find evidence and the situation is going to be under control. The next day, Colin gives Laura a day off to enjoy. He says it is to compensate for not giving her any gift from the company on her birthday. He plans for a day out and asks her to join him the next morning. On the other side, Miss Jin comes to the office to say her last goodbye as her project is finished. She gives Laura a note that Cookie has sent for her. In the note, Cookie says that he is sure that Colin likes her. Laura gets embarrassed after reading the note and thinks that this little kid Cookie is very naughty. Next, we see Colin trying a lot of outfits and asking Mark if he is looking younger. Mark asks him if he has started liking Laura, but Colin denies it. On their day out, Colin takes Laura to a park and she seems disappointed. Later, they start having fun. Laura eats a huge candy floss and Colin keeps imagining romantic scenarios. Laura gets a notification of his heart rate increasing and he gets embarrassed. Colin has planned to fish in the lake at the park. He keeps sitting there still for hours, and Laura gets bored and falls asleep. Later, when he drops her home, he gives her all the fish that he caught. Laura decides not to eat the fish and keeps them as pets. Meanwhile, in the night, the suspicious man gets inside Laura's house and starts looking for something. In the end, he takes a pen drive from Laura's bag and leaves. Colin's bodyguard, who is standing guard in front of Laura's house, sees him and starts chasing. The man manages to run away again. On the other side, we see David talking to someone about their plan failing because of Laura's recording. It seems there is someone above David who is directing him to take action against Colin and Laura. Next, we see Colin rushing back to Laura's place and they call the police. The house is in a mess as the suspicious man had looked through all their drawers and cupboards. Laura's aunt is scared and asks Colin to stay the night with them. She starts playing a matchmaker and arranges for them to sleep in the same room. In the morning, they share a romantic moment when Laura falls from the bed and ends up in Colin's arms. Next, we see that Colin is informed that the details of their Lonos Island project have been leaked. Mr. Jim comes to Colin's office and says that he is very worried. Mark and Colin are trying to figure out who could have leaked the information as not many employees had access to it. Mr. Jim starts suspecting Laura. He even asks Colin to suspend her until the things get cleared. Next, we see Colin being questioned at the investors' board meeting. They are angry at Colin for being irresponsible. They blame him for falling share prices. Colin manages to calm the board members by giving them counter solutions. Later, Colin tells Laura that he has full trust in her. That evening, Colin and Mark are having a conversation. Mark says that Colin should admit that he likes Laura, but Colin says that she is just a troublemaker. When Mark advises him to either suspend or transfer Laura for her safety, Colin also starts thinking about it. Meanwhile, Laura overhears their conversation and gets sad to hear that he doesn't like her. The next day, Colin asks for her resignation and Laura is very upset. She packs her stuff and leaves the office. On her way back, she realizes that Colin's bodyguards are following her. She gets further confused because at first Colin said that he trusts her, but he asked for her resignation and now is also worried for her safety. On the other side, we see Colin getting worried for Laura's career. He writes a recommendation letter for her and shows it to Mark. Mark suggests he give it to Laura personally. So Colin goes to Laura's house with the recommendation letter. He tells her that she will be given a lot of perks for her good work at the company and replaces all the old furniture in her house with new ones. He also makes noodles for her. They have to eat it under the candlelight because of a sudden power cut. Here they share an ambiguous moment. Colin is about to kiss Laura, but the guards call him and they snap out of it. Next, we see Colin and his team busy with the Lonos Island project. Colin wonders if the results in this universe will be the same as what happened in the parallel universe. Meanwhile, Laura plans a vacation at Lonos Island and goes on a trip. Actually, it was her dream vacation because she had spent her childhood on Lonos Island with her parents. On the inauguration day, we see Colin giving an impressive speech at the event. Later, he was talking with Mark. He had canceled the diving event near the Blue Caves because he wanted to avoid what happened in the parallel universe, but then he saw Laura with a group of tourists going for a boat ride and diving trip with a local diving club. Colin rushes to her and asks her what she is doing there. He asks her not to go diving, and when she keeps on insisting, he gets angry. He makes his security people take her outside of the island. Later, she disguises herself as a foreigner and tries to get into the group again, but Colin spots her straight away and stops her. Laura gets upset and starts crying loudly. She makes a scene and blames Colin for firing her even though it was not her fault. In the end, Colin agrees to take her on other adventures for free, so she gets happy. They go on a small, empty island on a yacht. Colin catches a lot of seafood and they barbecue on the sands. They play in the water and have a lot of fun. Later, in the evening, Collins finds that there is some problem with the yacht, so they have to spend the night at the island. He scares Laura by telling her about the wild animals. Later, they fell asleep close to each other. The next morning, Mark arrives on a safety boat and rescues them. Later, Mark asks Colin if he could have used the emergency button in the yacht to inform them and they would have arrived in the night itself, so why did he not do it? Colin tells Mark that he has actually started liking Laura and he wants to spend more time with her. On the other side, Laura is sleeping in her room, while the suspicious man is hiding around her hotel room. Later, Colin is not able to reach Laura through the phone, so he comes to her room to check on her. Laura has ordered for wine and they both start drinking, but it seems that something is mixed in their drink as they start getting tipsy very fast. They kiss each other, but Colin is aware that there is something wrong with their drink. He alerts his bodyguards, but it is already late. The suspicious man arrives at Laura's room. Colin tries to fight with him but faints because of the spiked wine in the end. Both Laura and Colin are kidnapped. Meanwhile, Colin's bodyguard fights with several goons that the suspicious man has brought with him. He informs the police before collapsing. Next, we see Laura and Colin tied with ropes. They are on a yacht and David is laughing at them. It seems David was the boss of the suspicious man. Colin asks them to leave Laura as they don't have any rivalry with her. But the man starts asking Laura to give him the hard disk that his father hid several years ago. Laura says she knows nothing about any hard drive. In the end, they throw her into the ocean with her hands tied. Colin also jumps into the ocean to save her. He kisses her inside the water to give her air. The suspicious man also jumps into the ocean behind them with a knife. He wants to kill them in the ocean. This time, both Colin and Laura get caught in the whirlpool of the Blue Cave. Next, Colin opens his eyes and finds himself back in his office on the day of the interview of social influencers. He rushes out into the hallway to find Laura. He hugs her passionately and kisses her, but Laura slaps him in return. Actually, Laura does not remember anything from the parallel universe. She thinks that Colin is a pervert. Later, she gets a flashback vision of them kissing inside the ocean, but she dismisses it as hallucination. Next, we see Laura sitting in front of Colin to give her interview. She is very scared because she has just slapped the CEO. The manager and the assistant start asking her difficult questions. Colin stops them and appoints Laura directly. He offers her a very lucrative contract. Laura is confused because Colin is being so good to her even though she just slapped him. Later, when she is leaving the company, she meets Mark on her way out. Again, she sees him and has an instant crush on him. Colin was following him out and saw their interaction. He realizes that she has a crush on Mark. He pulls them apart. When Laura asks him why is he following her, he says that he came to apologize for his actions. Colin tells her that she looks similar to a friend who passed away, so he got emotional earlier. Laura forgives him and leaves. Later, we see Mark and Colin at Colin's place. Colin was thinking about Laura and decided to keep her safe this time. He also wonders about the hard disk that the suspicious man was asking for from Laura. Someone sent people to their room, which means that someone in the company is involved. Colin wonders who it could be since he had already fired David. Actually, earlier in the parallel universe, Mark had found that his father, Mr. Jim, was keeping an eye on Laura and Colin. He had asked him about it, but Mr. Jim had knocked him down and tied him up to stop him from helping Colin and Laura. We realize that Mr. Jim is the main villain. Next, we see Colin asking his bodyguard to collect information on Laura's father. He asks him to work carefully and arranges for a different bodyguard for Laura. He also warns them against any suspicious-looking man and says that they should inform him about any stranger straight away. On the other side, Laura is getting a lot of publicity. She is given a special studio to do live streams. She is wondering about how she got so lucky. She meets Mark at the coffee spot and feels as if she knows him from the past. Colin arrives at that moment and takes Mark away. He asks him to stay away from Laura as she might have a little crush on him, and Mark agrees. Later, Laura offers Colin a cup of coffee and says it is according to his preference. Colin is shocked that she remembers his coffee preference, although she has forgotten other things that happened in the parallel universe. Next, we see Colin interfering in Laura's livestream. He stops her from eating unhealthy foods and wearing small clothes. Laura feels that he is purposefully creating problems for her, while Colin is worried that she might start hating him for being nosy. Next, we see Laura leaving after work. Colin joins her and says that the elevator might get stuck on their way down, so they should take the stairs. Laura gets tired after a while, so Colin carries her on his back. Laura feels that she has experienced this before. Later, Colin gets very tired after walking down so many stairs with her on his back, so Laura helps him and takes him back home. There he acts as if he is very unwell to make Laura care for him. There is a moment when they get very close as Laura helps him with drinking water. Laura feels uncomfortable and asks him if he likes her. Colin is about to confess, but Laura says that they have a big age gap and he should not think of her in that way. Colin denies liking her and says she just looks like his old friend who is dead. Later, he gets upset by the fact that he was rejected. Next, we see Colin preparing for the dinner invitation. He knows that the suspicious man will come there and he plans to catch him this time. Colin takes Laura along with him as his partner. He keeps on holding her hand all through the party. His team is on the lookout for the suspicious man, but they don't find him. Actually, in the parallel universe, when he jumped into the ocean with a knife to kill them, he was also sucked into the whirlpool of the blue cave. So this time, he is also aware of the parallel universe and the past repeating itself. He has come as a waiter and nobody is able to find him. Later, Colin sends Laura back home and also arranges for her shoes. He knows that there are a lot of stairs on her way back home and she might injure herself because of her heels the way she did in the parallel universe. When Laura is going back, she feels as if she saw Colin carrying her on his back. She is shocked to see that. She thinks that she has read so many romantic novels that now she has started seeing hallucinations. She does yoga to calm her mind but keeps on thinking of Colin and their romantic moments. Next, we see Colin go to Laura's studio to deliver coffee. He had thoughtfully put a handwritten note on every cup. So whichever cup Laura drinks, his message is delivered to her. But everyone at the studio thinks that they shouldn't drink the coffee since the cups have a personal message for Laura. In the end, Laura had to drink all the coffee and she got sick. Next, we see Colin rushing to Laura's home when he gets to know that she is sick. He takes care of her and impresses her aunt by telling her about his background and giving her a gift card. Laura keeps feeling that he is being too good to her, but she can't help but get happy because of his care. Later, he makes soup for Laura, but she is already asleep. Colin asks her how could she forget him when she liked him in the parallel universe. He also steals a kiss while she is sleeping. Next, we see Colin worrying about what to gift Laura on her birthday. Mark advises him to give her cosmetic products and flowers because all women like these things, but Colin finds that many of Laura's fans have already gifted her those things. He takes his gifts back. Next, we see him sitting with Miss Jin, who had come to talk about the Lonos Island project, but Colin wants advice on what to gift Laura. Laura sees them together and gets angry as she thinks that Colin is talking to his ex-girlfriend, even while flirting with her. Laura decides to go clubbing with her friends. Colin asks to join her, but she denies him. Next, we see Laura enjoying with her friends at the club. Colin also joins them. He brings a cake. When playing games, he keeps losing and has to drink a lot of alcohol as punishment. He gets drunk and Laura takes him back. On the way back, he tells her how he struggled to find a gift for her. He gives her a jingling bracelet and wears a similar one himself. He says it is a couple thing and asks her if she is willing to be his girlfriend. Laura agrees and they kiss. The next day, Colin is not able to remember if his confession was successful, so he goes to Laura's studio. Laura is a bit shy at first because she doesn't want to disclose their relationship in the company. Colin is very happy when she shows the bracelet in her hands. Later, they have lunch on the terrace together and everyone gets to know about them. Next, we see Colin wanting Laura to shift to his house because of security concerns. He had seen the suspicious man working as a waiter at a cafe where Laura went with her friend. He realizes that he was also sucked in the whirlpool of the blue cave and is aware of a parallel universe and thus has changed his strategy. He convinces Laura to move to his house. Laura agrees on the condition that they will live in separate rooms. Next, we see them going to Lonos Island for inspection, but they don't inspect anything instead, just spend a lot of time having fun together. They do various water sports activities and have some romantic moments. Later, they come back home and Laura wants to see a horror movie. Colin is very scared of ghosts, but he agrees nevertheless. On the other side, his bodyguard finds that 18 years ago, Laura's father was the supervisor of the Lonos Island project, and Colin realizes that the hard drive the suspicious man is looking for is related to the Lonos project. Next, he meets his grandpa and asks him about the accident in which his parents drowned. Grandpa tells him that it was not an accident, and in fact, someone had deliberately caused it to kill his parents. Colin decides to be extra careful. Next, we see Laura decide to dive for her live stream. Colin is against the idea, but Mark and his manager suggest that if she trains well, she can save herself in future in case of danger. When Laura is training, Colin keeps on getting worried. Later, she starts trembling inside the water and is brought outside the pool. Colin gets very sacred, but it turns out that she was acting to make fun of him. Colin gets very angry and Laura has to apologize for a long time before he forgives her. On the other side, Mr. Jim and the suspicious man are very sure of their success this time. He has also installed a recording device in Laura's keychain and is keeping an eye on their every movement. Later, Laura drops her phone accidentally and the keychain breaks. They find the device and realize that someone is keeping an eye on them. Colin appoints lots of bodyguards and gets angry when he is not able to reach Laura's phone because her phone battery died. Later, he had to apologize for his short temper. Next, his bodyguard informs him that Laura's father's death was also not accidental. They have found evidence that the fire was caused deliberately by some company-related people. Colin figures that no one related to the Lonos Island project was alive except for Mr. Jim. So Mr. Jim must be the one behind all the tragedies. He rushes to Laura and tells her everything. They start looking for the hard drive that the suspicious man mentioned. They find a puzzle written on the back of a photo frame of her parents' photograph. They figured that the hard drive might be buried where they were standing in the photograph. It was under a huge tree, and the photograph was taken on the Lonos Island. Colin and Laura plan to go there and find out the truth. The next day, they hike in the forest and reach the place in the photograph. They start digging and find the hard disk, but at that very moment, the suspicious man arrives and starts attacking them with a knife. In the end, he injures Colin and Laura has to throw the hard drive to distract him. When the suspicious man goes to take away the hard drive, Colin and Laura try to run away. Their bodyguards also arrive at that moment and the man runs away. Colin wants them to follow him to bring back the hard drive, but Laura tells him that she threw a fake hard drive that she had brought with her. She has the original one. Next, we see them checking the content on the hard drive. It has a recording of the conversation between Mr. Jim and Laura's father. Mr. Jim was getting angry at him for reporting his illegal activities on Lonos Island to Colin's father. On the other side, Mr. Jim realizes that they have a fake drive, yet he is not scared because he knows that just a recording is not enough evidence to prove him guilty of the murder. He decides to kill Colin and Laura like he killed their parents. Next, we see Colin proposes to Laura for marriage and vows to keep her happy. He makes elaborate arrangements for the proposal and also gifts her a puppy. Laura says yes, and the very next day their colleagues receive an invitation to their wedding. Laura's aunt and Colin's grandpa are very happy for them. Grandpa even apologizes to Laura because his company was the cause of her parents' death. On the other side, Colin asks Mark to meet him and tells him everything about Mr. Jim. Mark is sad to know the truth, but he remembers that his father was always a violent man. He used to beat him up when he was a child as he was always jealous of Colin's parents, and every time Colin used to save him from his father's anger. Next, we see Mark confronting his father for his crimes. He asks him to stop and accept his mistakes, but Mr. Jim is not ready to do it. Next, we see Colin and Laura having their pre-wedding shoot. They click a lot of cute pictures together. They get married the next day. Everyone is very happy for them. Colin gives a cute little speech before the ring ceremony. He reads it out of a paper. He is embarrassed to kiss her in front of so many people, but Laura kisses him instead. Later in the evening, they have a party. Mr. Jim offers Laura a drink. Her aunt doesn't want her to have it, but Laura takes the drink. Next, we see Colin get there and take the drink from Laura's hands. He drinks it for her, then they go for a dance. On the other side, Mr. Jim asks his goons to come and attack the party. Colin and his bodyguards are ready for the attack, and they cut the power. Next, we see two sacks which are surrounded by Mr. Jim's goons. The suspicious man asks them to open the sack and bring out Colin. Then he gives him the property papers and asks him to sign them. Colin says he knows everything about Mr. Jim. So Mr. Jim comes out of the shadow and says that he should have killed Colin along with his parents. He threatens him to sign the papers or else he will kill his wife. Next, they found that the person in the other sack was not Laura. Instead, it was Mark, who was crying on hearing his father's cruel words. Later, Mr. Jim orders his goons to kill Colin in anger. A person attacks him with a knife, but Mark comes in front and gets stabbed. At that very moment, police also arrive and arrest Mr. Jim and his men. Later, Laura gets all the memories from the parallel universe back and realizes that Colin had died to save his life twice. They go to their parents' graves to seek their blessing. Later, we see that Mark has recovered from his injury and is leaving the company to travel. He wants to find his purpose in life. Next, we see Colin and Laura, who have come to Lonos Island for their honeymoon. The drama ends on a happy note.